This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Okay, but I have to eat. I have to eat the cereal.
Yeah, eat. Fun little exciting thing. I'm meeting with our new podcast editor tomorrow to hand off this audio, and this episode is going to be edited by our new podcast editor. I'll start talking about the 1 in a Million episode while you're chewing, and the beauty of having a podcast editor is she is going to edit on 2 tracks. So listeners, you're not going to have to listen to Judith eating cereal. So that's exciting.
That's exciting.
I know.
I'm so excited to have her part of the family.
I know, me too. I want to also thank all of our listeners and everyone who has supported the podcast via buymeacoffee.com/ALAIL podcast, because you are making it possible for us to pay a professional editor for this podcast. And I can't tell you how thrilling that is for me to know I don't have to edit this. So big thumbs up. Shout out to our lovely podcast editor who I know personally and I love her. So we're very excited. Okay. Today's topic is one that I think is going to resonate with all of you. And we hear a lot. We've seen a lot on Instagram. We've felt it a lot in our own lives. How, before something horrible happens in your life, statistics, very unlikely statistics, can feel comforting. Like stillbirth, 1 in 160. Wow, that's so rare. That's not going to happen to me. SIDS, 1 in 320. Whew, that's so rare. That's not going to happen to me. And then once it happens to you, all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, 1 in 320. I know 320 people. Of course it could have happened to me. Like all of these like rare things, like once it happens to you, the statistics all of a sudden are not comforting. And I know as we have moved forward in our lives since the loss, like Judith, you've had subsequent pregnancies. I've had some health stuff. Like I've definitely looked at statistics in a totally different way. And I kind of fall on both sides of the coin, wherein sometimes they are more comforting and sometimes they're less comforting. So we're going to talk about that today. And I've got some big thoughts about it. Tell me how you feel.
I need a sip of water.
What happened to your arm, by the way? The fuck is that?
It's an Elsa and Anna tattoo.
Oh, okay. It looks like a wound.
Yes, I'm aware. It's a huge problem. I can't get it off. I don't know why. I've had it for 2 weeks, and I've showered many times between those 2 weeks, and I still have Elsa and Anna on my arm.
Baby oil.
I don't have that, but I bet that would take it off. Any other ideas?
Olive oil.
Olive oil?
Or coconut oil. Yeah.
I have that.
Yeah. That'll work.
I feel so much better. I was so hungry. Wow. Okay. The question was about statistics.
Talk to me about statistics. Well, we're going to talk about statistics.
Are you the type of person that typically finds comfort in statistics or no?
Oh, I always was. Yeah. Well, and I think this is, I'm sure, the most common thought on planet Earth. But there was definitely a part of me before I had my own personal tragedy that was like, even if something was like not that rare, I'd be like, well, it wouldn't happen to me. Like I definitely had this like mindset of like, despite the statistic, it didn't matter because it wouldn't happen to me. Like just this like protective, I think this is a thing that humans think.
Do you think that comes from like being a white privileged, or does it come from a protective layer of protecting yourself where you're like, I don't want to imagine it could happen to me because it's so scary. So I'm just going to remove,
I think that's a really good question. I have a feeling that the natural instinct to think that is very human and everyone has it. However, I think the fact that I got to age 30 before I tested that belief is probably pretty closely tied to my level of privilege that I've experienced in my life that I hold. So I have a feeling it's both, but I do think that's a pretty normal thing. And I'm sure even people who hear about my loss, who know me personally and are close to me, knew Quinn, he died, right? I think there's probably people in my life who think, well, that wouldn't happen to me. Right? Like, even though you know it happened to someone you know. So like it could happen to you.
No, I think they all think that.
Yeah, right?
I told you, I know I have friends who co-sleep with their children.
Yeah.
I guarantee that they are thinking to themselves, that couldn't happen to me. Although I have one friend who told me that she co-sleeps after she experienced a loss because she's like, well, anything could happen. So, why not? Even if we do everything right. So I'm just going to do some things wrong and take my chances.
I mean, yeah, so that's one of the ways that I think my relationship to statistics has gotten more chill, in that 1 in 320 is kind of rare. And if I think about Quinn's actual risk factors, we were even lower than 1 in 320 because he was breastfed, he was full term, like he had all he was lying flat on his back, like he had all of the things that should have prevented SIDS, and it still happened anyway. So to a certain extent, there's a part of me that's like, what's going to happen is going to happen. And so kind of like, fuck it
Yeah.
sometimes. But then on the other side, I also approach certain things with a level of knowledge that I can be that 1% or that 1 in 1,000 easily. It can happen. It's happened before. So there are certain things I approach with a lot more caution than I did before.
I remember when I was pregnant with Aiden, there was a website that I used to go to all the time called the miscarriage calculator.
Oh, 1,000%. Yes. I used to do that too.
You're well versed in the miscarriage calculator.
Yep.
You put in how pregnant you are, you put in like your age and whatever, and it tells you there's two ways, okay? It says your likelihood of miscarrying
Mhm.
and your likelihood of like successful pregnancy, okay? And then there's this button that says reassure me that you can click, and it'll be like, since yesterday, your chances of a miscarriage have gone down 1%. That's like 100 bonus stars or something like that. Like, I'm trying to read exactly what it says. I check that thing compulsively. Like I'm opening it up now because I want to like read it to you, but I check that thing every single day.
Were you checking it with a high level of anxiety and you wanted to be reassured, or were you just like, I might as well check?
No, I was anxious. So like, okay, yeah, no, I was 100% anxious.
I checked all of that stuff almost with like a detachment from the statistics because, again, I was thinking, well, my baby won't die, but I'm just curious.
Yes, I know, because
I'm an idiot.
yeah, well, that's so not how I live my life. Like,
I know.
I'm so much more anxious. Hold on, I want to read. Hold on, I'm putting it in. Let's see how pregnant I am and what my odds. Oh, well, now it won't show me because I'm past 20 weeks. But okay, here's what it'll say in case you're wondering. So it'll be like 10 weeks, 6 days or something, and then it'll be like probability of not miscarrying is 98.3%. Probability of miscarriage is 1.7%. And then it says nervous about miscarriage. Let us reassure you. And then you put in 10 weeks, 3 days, or whatever that is. Okay, let's just say. So your probability of not miscarrying is 97.9%. And then it says, since becoming pregnant, your probability of miscarriage has decreased from an estimated 28.9% to 2.1%. It says like your probability of miscarriage decreased by 93%. Okay, so I used to read that stuff every day, all day, and I actually did find it reassuring. And now I don't. And it's so interesting because I find that like my human brains, and I always say this on the podcast, we're so fickle.
Yeah.
We're so simple. We're so dumb. Like,
I know.
even when we know better, we still want to have that reassurance and that hope.
Yes. And I even remember I'm thinking of like a couple of specific times before the loss where I would think about statistics in a way that I wouldn't think about them now. I would look at like when I was trying to get pregnant with Quinn, I'd look at the fertility things. Like I would look at like when I had sex in relation to ovulation and be like, okay, well, I have a 37% chance this month. And I'd be like, well, it's my 6 months. So then it's actually only like a 29% chance. And so I'd like read all the stats. And the thing that is like both good and bad about me and my history is I have like a science background in college. So like I do have a certain amount of literacy with statistics and studies so that I can typically read stuff and understand what they're saying. But that means there's so much more information out there that I can choose to consume, that like so many more statistics that I can consume.
But you know what's funny about what you just said? Okay, so you're like, oh, I have a 30% chance of getting pregnant this month. After Aiden died, like when I became one half of 1%, 30%, it's like 100%.
I know. Well, I think that's why we were so optimistic that I was going to get pregnant so fast with IVF, because we were like, IVF transfer has a 70% success rate. That's like practically 100.
Isn't that interesting?
Practically 100.
I know.
And then, of course, I couldn't even do an IVF transfer. And so we were just like total whatever. We were totally caught off guard. But another area where I distinctly remember like looking at risks in a way I would not now is when I was approaching Quinn's due date. I very much had like the kind of blasé attitude that I was like, he'll come when he's ready. And like, I wouldn't have like let him go. I wouldn't have stayed pregnant like up to 42 weeks. Like I had a scheduled induction at like 40 weeks, 6 days or something. He wound up being born at 40 weeks, 3 days. But I definitely remember thinking like, should I be more concerned? Should I induce? Like all of these questions that I remember asking my doctor, like, should I be doing kick counts? And she was like, well, kick counts can sometimes make people anxious. And I was like, okay, I won't do them. And she was like, you want to induce now? And I was like, no, I'm good. Like, just like all of these like questions that like, I look back at that and I know, because okay, I look back at that and I think to myself, it's a miracle he was born alive.
Yeah.
But I also look back at that and I'm like, the statistics say he would be born alive. So of course he was born alive. But it just all feels, I feel like my overall sentiment about babies now is that it feels so spectacularly unlikely that they're going to be gestated, born alive, and then just live. Like that is like so not in my realm of experience. And so no matter what the statistics say, that doesn't feel real to me because 100% of my children are dead.
I feel like when I read these statistics generally now, they don't bring any reassurance because 1 out of whatever number is a person with a life and a person devastated and a person who was hoping for another outcome. And I see the stories more than I see the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when I see the story, when I know the stories, 1 is too many.
Right.
So the 1 out of 10,000, that is too many.
Yeah. And out of all of the ways babies can die, I'm sure we haven't encountered all of them, but we've encountered a hell of a lot of them in our Instagram and podcast community. So like they all feel very real and very possible.
Right. But I just don't really find statistics reassuring anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, like I said, like it doesn't, that 1 out of 10,000, the suffering of that one person is so great that it's like, I'm aware. And I feel like I struggle, and I've said this many, many times, with my friends that are so naive because that's really a struggle for me because they think that that would never happen to them. And
right.
They're done.
They have that mindset of that won't happen to me. And I don't think anybody actually, when probed, genuinely thinks it could not happen to them just because they're them. I don't think anybody actually thinks that. But that is the mindset that people bring into a lot of these decisions.
It's interesting because people would say, like, Judith, you're such a laid back parent. Like, aren't you worried about your child having a concussion because they fell off their scooter or whatever? And I would say it's not that I don't think it'll happen to me. It's that I know I can handle it if it does.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of like a difference. Like, I don't think my friends that haven't experienced loss are thinking, well, like, I'm not worried because I know I can handle it. They're thinking it won't happen to me.
Right.
But I'm thinking, well, it could happen to me, but I can handle it. By the way, I do make my kid wear a helmet. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying, like, I
mean, I also think like you very much, I've witnessed with your daughter, have an attitude of like, she can break her arm. Like, not that you want her to break her arm, but like, she's alive. Who gives a shit? Like, there are so many problems.
Yeah, I feel that way, but I'm saying like, yeah, I definitely feel that way. But I don't think my other friends who are playing the statistics game are reassured.
Right.
In that way.
Right. So I have a fun little activity that I want us to do. So think about a couple of the things that happened to you in that first year after the loss. So baby dying was 1 in 320. SIDS, 1 in 320.
My husband lost his job.
Chance of spousal loss. Sorry, not spousal loss. Job loss. Let me see. What percent of people lose their job in a year? What? No, that can't be right. 4.4%. Okay, so 4.4% people lose their job, and then your parents getting divorced. What percent of couples in their 60s get divorced? 39%.
Wow, that's huge.
So it's 39% have experienced divorce. So the chance that, that doesn't quite track.
That's huge.
Divorce rate, one in 10 are getting divorced at 65 or older. Okay, so the chances that, oh my God, Judith, the chances that you would have lived the year you lived after Aiden died, well, when Aiden died, 0.00001375. So that's 0.001%.
I would be like, so that's no one.
Okay, so let's look up mine. So what percent of people in their 30s come out as transgender? 7% of trans people come out in their 30s, but how many people are trans? 5%. Okay, so 7% of 5%. 0.07 times 0.05 times 1 divided by 320. Wow, we had about the same. 0.0000109. Okay, so and of course, everyone on planet Earth, like there's as many paths in life as there are stars in the sky, grains of sand on a beach. But just to think about that.
You know what I'm saying? Like that, like to me, like that's not reassuring. If I know that I'm living a life that 0% of 0% of people live, it's like, well, but all sorts of people live through all sorts of shit. So like, basically,
I definitely don't find it reassuring, but I do think it's funny.
I don't think statistics work.
I went to see my cardiologist recently because I have this whole heart thing potentially related to Quinn's death. And my cardiologist, he is a true scientist. Like he is statistics and studies through and through. And he's so like, I highly doubt he's ever going to listen to this, but I would describe him as like not particularly warm. Like he's very clinical, analytical. And he looks at my situation, all the things I have, and he talks about like whether the chance of my future baby is dying. And he like does the math. He's like, well, you have this in your family and you have that in your family, and that's one over this, and that's one over that, and that's one in that. And then he like in his head comes out and he's like, yeah, your future children aren't going to die. And I'm like, great. And for some reason, when like an expert who like knows all this stuff is like saying that, I'm like, okay, like I'll take that. I will take that as reassurance.
It's super interesting because I would be like, yeah, but he did die.
I know. But what he's saying is like the chances that it's something that we wouldn't catch are so slim now that I'm in his care.
But it doesn't, okay, but he would look at your family originally.
Yeah.
And be like, the chance of your child dying of is 0%, so you're probably fine. So like,
but here's something that he said that I did find very comforting. He said he has seen over 10,000 patients, and of those 10,000, only 3 have died, and all 3 died because they declined care he told them they needed.
That's very interesting. Let me tell you about this conversation I had with this one guy that I'll never forget. So this is unrelated, but just keep this in because it's just an interesting conversation I had with someone. This guy who's an oncologist, so he helps, he deals with people with cancer. I was talking to him about, and I was saying that I know a lot of people who've done IVF to eliminate the BRCA gene. So their children won't have the BRCA gene and develop cancer. And he was saying, oh, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that my patients do that. And I was like, why? And he was like, because we can treat BRCA, we can treat breast cancer, we can treat cancer. Like if we know that it runs in your family, we can keep our eyes out for it, and then we can treat it early, and then whatever. And then I was saying that is dumb, and that seems so risky to me, and so naive. Like these doctors think because the statistics are low and because they're trained that nothing can happen on their watch.
And I mean, that's what my cardiologist said about me doing IVF. He was like, I don't think that's necessary for you to take that gene out because it's fine.
I think that requires a level of like hubris.
Yes.
That I don't have.
Listen, I'm with you. And I think that's why I feel so good in my particular situation, I feel good having like so many different doctors You do not look good.
I do not. I need to go.
Are you having contractions?
Yeah, but I'm not having a baby. I'm just having contractions.
Okay. In that case, let's stop here. But listeners, I would love to hear if your thoughts and feelings about statistics have changed since your loss. I obviously ours have in a significant way. I think especially around issues related to childbearing. But I'd be curious if different types of statistics affect you differently. So reach out to us on Instagram. And again, one more shout out to our new podcast editor. I'm so happy that I am not editing this episode. Bye, guys.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!